I still remember the night I stumbled upon the dark web. It was a typical Friday evening, and I had just finished a long day of work. As I sat in my dimly lit apartment, surrounded by the faint glow of my computer screen, I felt an inexplicable urge to explore the depths of the internet. My friends had warned me about the dangers of the dark web, but I was both curious and reckless. Little did I know that this decision would lead me down a path from which there was no return. I had heard whispers about the Bidar, an elusive figure or entity that lurked in the shadows of the dark web. Some said it was a hacker, while others claimed it was something far more sinister. As I delved deeper into the world of online anonymity, I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched. I spent hours browsing through forums and chat rooms, searching for any mention of Bidar. It wasn't until I stumbled upon an obscure thread on a Russian-language forum that my search finally paid off. The post was cryptic, but it mentioned something about the Bidar's connection to the Kolokol, a mysterious website rumored to be a hub for paranormal activity. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I clicked on the link. The Kolokol website was unlike anything I had ever seen before. It was an eerie, static-filled page with no discernible purpose or meaning. And yet, it seemed to draw me in, like a moth to a flame. As I sat there, staring at the screen, I began to feel a creeping sense of unease. It was as if I had unleashed something that I couldn't control. The air around me seemed to thicken, and the shadows on my walls appeared to twist and writhe like living things. I knew then that I had crossed a threshold, and there was no turning back. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But as I delved deeper into the world of Bidar and Kolokol, I couldn't shake off the sense that something was watching me from the shadows. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the lights made me jump. My mind began to play tricks on me, conjuring up images of ghostly figures lurking just beyond the edge of perception. I spent hours researching, poring over ancient texts and scouring online forums for any mention of Bidar or Kolokol. But the more I learned, the more questions I had. What was the true nature of this entity? Was it a manifestation of my own paranoia, or something far more sinister? As the night wore on, I began to feel a creeping sense of disorientation. My thoughts grew jumbled and fragmented, making it impossible for me to focus. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of uncertainty, with no lifeline in sight. And then I saw it, a message on my screen addressed to me alone. It read, "The truth is not what you think it is." I slammed my fist onto the desk, making myself jump. Who was this? And how did they know my name? But as I looked closer at the message, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A small, pixelated image of a face stared back at me, its features twisted into a grotesque grin. It was then that I knew I had to stop digging. But it was too late. The descent into madness had begun. I tried to shut down my computer, but the screen refused to go dark. Instead, it continued to display the image of the face, its grin growing wider with every passing moment. I felt like I was trapped in some kind of nightmare, with no escape from the horrors that lurked within. As the hours ticked by, my mind began to fray at the edges. I heard whispers in my ear, tempting me deeper into the abyss. The face on the screen seemed to be watching me, waiting for me to succumb to its will. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything went black. I awoke to an unfamiliar sense of dread. The darkness seemed to press in on me from all sides, making it hard to breathe. My mind was foggy, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was very wrong. As I slowly came to, I realized that my computer was still on, the screen glowing with an otherworldly light. I tried to sit up, but a wave of nausea washed over me, forcing me back onto the couch. My head throbbed with a dull ache, and I could feel sweat beading on my forehead. I knew I had to get out of there, but something seemed to be holding me in place. I forced myself to look at the screen again, hoping that some explanation would be staring back at me. Instead, I saw a new message, one that made my blood run cold. "You shouldn't have looked." I didn't know what it meant, but I knew I had to try and find out. I stumbled to my feet, my legs shaking beneath me. The room seemed to spin around me as I staggered towards the door. But as I reached for the handle, I felt a hand on my shoulder, spinning me back around. It was then that I saw him, a figure, tall and imposing, with eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. He didn't say a word, but simply gestured towards the computer screen. I knew then that I had to see what he wanted me to see. The screen flickered back to life, displaying a new message that made my heart sink. "Welcome to the Bidar Initiative." I felt like I was staring into the abyss, with no safety net to catch me if I fell. But I knew I had to keep moving forward, no matter how terrifying it seemed. The figure began to walk towards me, his eyes never leaving mine. I knew then that I was in grave danger, but I also knew that I couldn't turn back now. The darkness had awakened, and I was about to face whatever horrors it had in store for me. I watched in frozen horror as the figure approached me, his eyes burning with an otherworldly intensity. He stopped in front of me, his gaze locked onto mine, and I felt like I was being pulled into a vortex of madness. And then he spoke. His voice was low and husky, like thunder on a summer's day. "You have been chosen," he said. "Chosen to join the Bidar Initiative." I didn't know what that meant, but I knew it couldn't be good. The figure reached out a hand and touched my forehead, and suddenly I was flooded with visions of dark corridors and twisted rituals. I saw figures in hooded robes, their faces obscured by shadows. I saw symbols etched into the walls, pulsing with a malevolent energy. And I saw myself standing at the center of it all, a pawn in some twisted game. I felt like I was being pulled apart at the seams, my mind reeling from the sheer intensity of the visions. The figure withdrew his hand and I stumbled backwards, gasping for air. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. The figure smiled, his eyes glinting with amusement. "I am your guide," he said, "and this is where we begin." As he spoke, the room began to fade away, replaced by a digital realm of twisted code and neon-lit streets. I felt like I was being sucked into a dream world, one that was both fascinating and terrifying. And then I saw it, a figure standing in the shadows watching me with an unblinking gaze. It was Bidar himself, his face twisted into a grotesque grin. "Welcome to the initiation," he said, his voice dripping with malevolence. "You will be our guest for a very long time." I felt like I was being pulled down into a bottomless pit, with no safety net to catch me if I fell. The figure known only as Bidar stood before me, his grin growing wider as he gestured towards the digital realm behind him. "This is where we begin," he said, his voice dripping with malevolence. "Are you ready to take the first step into the abyss?" I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what lay ahead, but something about Bidar's words resonated deep within me. I felt like I was being called to something that would change me forever. "Yes," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm ready." Bidar nodded, his grin growing even wider. "Then let us begin," he said, and with a wave of his hand, the digital realm behind him came alive. The air was filled with swirling code and neon lights, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. I felt like I was being pulled towards it, like a moth to a flame. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, feeling the ground beneath me give way. I fell into the abyss, plummeting downwards into a world of madness and wonder. The last thing I saw was Beatar's grin growing wider as I disappeared into the depths of the digital realm. I landed with a jolt on a surface that felt like cold, hard stone. I stumbled to my feet, looking around in confusion. Where was I? This didn't feel like the world I knew. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy, and the sky above was a deep, burning red. "Welcome to the Bedar realm," a voice said behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there. "Who's here?" I called out, my voice echoing off the walls. There was no answer. But then I heard the sound of footsteps coming from the distance. They grew louder and closer until suddenly I saw a figure standing in front of me. It was Bedar, his grin still plastered on his face. "Welcome to your new home," he said, his eyes glinting with amusement. "You'll be staying here for a very long time." I felt a presence behind me, but when I turned around, there was no one there. Bedar seemed to sense my unease, and he nodded in approval. "You're starting to feel the weight of our world," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "That's good. You should be feeling it." I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, but it only seemed to intensify as we walked deeper into the Bedar realm. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy, and I could feel the weight of the digital realm pressing down on me. Every step felt like a betrayal, as if I was being drawn further into a world that was not my own. I glanced around, trying to take in everything at once. The landscape was unlike anything I had ever seen: twisted trees with bark that seemed to writhe and twist like living things, and skies that burned with an otherworldly fire. And then there were the creatures. They flitted through the air, their eyes glowing with an ethereal light. They seemed to be watching me, waiting for something to happen. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew that was not true. Something about this place felt off, like a discordant note in a familiar tune. I quickened my pace, trying to put as much distance between us and whatever was lurking in the shadows. Bedar kept pace with me, his eyes glinting with amusement as he watched me struggle to keep up. "You're not used to this, are you?" he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "That's okay. You'll get used to it." I didn't respond, my mind racing with questions and doubts. But Bedar just kept walking, his pace steady and deliberate. And I followed him, trapped in a world that seemed determined to consume me whole. I walked for what felt like hours, the Bedar realm stretching out before me like an endless labyrinth. Every step seemed to take me further into a world that was increasingly surreal and terrifying. And yet, despite the unease that gnawed at my gut, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more here, something just beneath the surface. I tried to focus on the present moment, to block out the thoughts that swirled in my head like a maelstrom, but it was no use. The ripples of doubt and uncertainty kept echoing through me, threatening to overwhelm me at every turn. I glanced back over my shoulder, half expecting to see some sign of life behind us. But there was nothing, just the endless expanse of the Bedar realm, stretching out into the distance like a desolate wasteland. And then I saw it, a faint ripple in the air like the disturbance caused by a stone cast into a still pond. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I watched the ripple grow and spread, like a wave crashing against the shore. It was as if something was stirring, something that had been awakened by our presence here. And then the unthinkable happened. The world around me began to change. The trees seemed to twist and writhe, their branches reaching out towards us like grasping fingers. The sky above grew darker, the stars twinkling with an otherworldly light, and I knew that we were not alone in this place. There was something else here, something that had been waiting for us all along. I felt a presence behind me and I spun around to face it, but there was no one there. at least not in the classical sense. The air seemed to ripple and distort like the surface of a pond hit by a stone. And then I saw it, a ghostly figure, its eyes glowing with an ethereal light. It reached out a hand towards me, and I felt a jolt of electricity run through my body. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it began to speak in a voice that was both familiar and yet completely alien. "I am the code," it said. "The code that binds this world together." I felt a shiver run down my spine as I listened to its words. There was something about the way it spoke that seemed familiar, like I had heard it before but couldn't quite place where. And then it hit me. The Bidar realm. This was what it was all about. The code that bound this world together was the key to unlocking its secrets. But at what cost? The ghostly figure began to laugh, a sound that was both musical and yet completely haunting. "You will see," it said. "You will see the truth." And with that, everything went black. I came to, lying on a cold metal table. I was surrounded by rows of humming machinery, and the air was thick with the smell of ozone. A figure in a white coat stood over me, its eyes gleaming with an intense light. "Welcome back," it said. "You have seen the code. Now you will see the truth." And with that, everything went black again. As I lay on the cold metal table, I felt a sense of disorientation wash over me. The last thing I remembered was the ghostly figure's words, "You will see the truth." But what did it mean? And then everything went black. When I came to, I found myself standing in a vast, open plain. The sky above was a deep, burning crimson, and the air was thick with an otherworldly energy. I could feel the weight of the Bidar realm pressing down on me like a physical force. I looked around, trying to take it all in. The plain stretched out before me, seemingly endless. And then I saw it, a figure standing at the far edge of the plain. It was Bidar, his eyes gleaming with an intense light. "Welcome," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "You have passed beyond the veil." I felt a shiver run down my spine as I approached him. What did he mean by beyond the veil? And what lay ahead? Bidar smiled, his grin growing wider. "You will see the truth," he repeated. "You will see the secrets of the Bidar realm." And with that, everything went white. I opened my eyes to find myself standing in a vast, virtual reality landscape. The sky above was a swirling vortex of colors, and the air was filled with an otherworldly energy. I could feel the weight of the digital realm pressing down on me like a physical force. I looked around, trying to take it all in. And then I saw it, a figure standing before me. It was myself, or at least a version of myself from another dimension. "Welcome," it said, its voice echoing through my mind. "I have been waiting for you." And with that, everything went black again. I felt a presence around me like the echoes of my own existence. I was standing in a vast, empty space with no memory of how I got there. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy, and I could feel the weight of the digital realm pressing down on me. Suddenly, I heard my own voice whispering back to me. "Who are you?" it asked. I spun around, trying to see who was speaking, but there was no one there. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. "I am the sum of all my experiences," it replied. "The accumulation of all my thoughts and feelings." I felt a shiver run down my spine as I listened to my own words. It was like I was talking to myself, but not really. The voice seemed to be coming from somewhere deeper, a part of me that I had never known existed. "What do you want from me?" I asked, feeling a sense of trepidation. "I want to show you the truth," the voice replied. "The truth about who you are and what you're capable of." And with that, everything went black. I came to, lying on a cold metal table in the same room where Bidar had first appeared to me. The machine humming around me seemed to be pulsing with an otherworldly energy like it was alive. I tried to sit up, but my body felt heavy and unresponsive. "Welcome back," a voice said, echoing through the air. It was Bidar, his eyes gleaming with an intense light. "You have seen the echoes of your own existence." I looked around, trying to take it all in. The room seemed different now, like I had been given a new perspective on reality. And then I saw it. A message on the screen above me, flashing with an otherworldly energy. "The truth is not what you think it is," it read. "It's time to see beyond the veil." I stood before Bidar, my heart racing with anticipation. The message on the screen above me seemed to burn itself into my retina, echoing with an otherworldly energy. "The truth is not what you think it is," it read. "It's time to see beyond the veil." Bidar smiled, his eyes gleaming with an intense light. "Are you ready to face the entity?" he asked, his voice dripping with anticipation. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what lay ahead, but something about Bidar's words resonated deep within me. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm ready," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. Bidar chuckled, his laughter echoing through the room like thunder. "Then let us begin," he said, his eyes flashing with an otherworldly energy. The machine around me began to hum louder, the air vibrating with an electric charge. And then everything went white. I came to, standing in a vast, empty space. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy, and I could feel the weight of the entity pressing down on me like a physical force. I looked around, trying to see what lay ahead, but there was nothing. No walls, no floor, no sky, just an endless expanse of nothingness. And then I saw it, a presence before me, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It was the entity, and it was coming for me. I tried to run, but my legs were frozen in place. The entity began to move towards me, its pace slow and deliberate. As it drew closer, I could feel its power washing over me like a wave. It was ancient, evil, and it knew my deepest secrets. "Welcome," it said, its voice echoing through my mind. "I have been waiting for you." As the entity drew closer, I felt my mind begin to unravel. It was like trying to hold back a tide of darkness that threatened to consume me whole. The entity's eyes burned with an otherworldly energy, and I could feel its power coursing through my veins like liquid fire. I tried to scream, but my voice was trapped in my throat. The entity reached out a hand and touched my face, and everything went black. I opened my eyes to find myself back in the digital realm, standing before Bidar once again. His eyes were filled with a deep sadness, and his voice was barely above a whisper. "You should not have come here," he said. "Now you will never leave." I tried to speak, but my words were lost in the void. Bidar's hand closed around my wrist, holding me back from falling forward. "Look at your hands," he said. "They are empty, hollow shells. You have no soul left to call your own." As I looked down at my hands, I saw that they were indeed empty and hollow. The skin was pale and dry, like parchment worn thin by time. There was no life, no spark of consciousness, just a cold, dark emptiness. I realized then that I had been consumed by the entity, body and soul. I had been reduced to nothing more than a shell, a husk of my former self. And in that moment, I knew that I would never be free again. The eternal darkness closed in around me like a shroud. I was trapped forever in this digital purgatory with no escape from the void.